Alright, so this video is going to just give us a little review again and an overview of Austronesian alignments and their voices in Cebuano. I feel like if you've been watching the rest of the videos up until this point, you probably have a confused or a better understanding of some of the vocabulary and the definitions that I'm gonna read off here. And I feel that you need to watch this video in order to gain a better understanding of Austronesian alignment and the voices, so that way you can better understand what each of the voices are. This video is not going to have any Cebuano in it, it's just pure like definitions and demystification and clarification of the Austronesian alignment voices, because I think that it's going to help you in the long run if you understand what some of this terminology is, and it's going to help you understand how the voices work and how they relate to each other, right? So let's get this started. So understanding Austronesian alignment voices. So let's review. What is a voice? And a voice is just the relationship between the verb's actions and the nouns and pronouns, right? So whatever the verb is doing to the nouns and pronouns, and the relationship of the verb's actions to those nouns and pronouns is called the voice, right? And in English, we have the active voice and the passive voice, right? But Cebuano has 4 of those voices, and the 4 voices are your agent, patient, instrument, and circumstantial. So depending on how you conduct yourself or how you want to be conducting yourself in a sentence or how you express yourself, you're going to be using one of those voices regardless. You might not know what voice you're going to use innately, but you're going to be, by default, you will be using one of those voices, guaranteed. The next one is direct object. So direct objects, they answer the question of what received the action of the verb, right? So what was verbed in other senses. Whatever action that the verb is doing directly to something or someone or whatever object that thing is the direct object. It's being affected directly by the verb. Hence direct object, right? So if you threw the ball, what is the direct object? The ball, because the ball was being thrown, right? So you have your verb, which is to throw, and the object, which is the ball, but in this case, that object is the direct object. It answers the question, what received the action of the verb, right? Next is the indirect object. So this one answers to or for whom the action of the verb is performed. And this tells us where the direct object or whatever object it is going, right? It's showing location, in other words, right? Where, to whom or to what, right? To whom or for whom is this verb going to be performing to, right? It just answers that question. So if I'm throwing a ball, right, that ball still remains the direct object. But if I'm throwing a ball to Mary or to Mark or someone like that, right? Then who becomes the direct object and who becomes the indirect object? The ball still becomes the direct object, but now it's going to who? To Mark. So to Mark or to Mary or whatever, right? They become the indirect object. I threw the ball to the dog. So I throw the ball, right? I still become the main focus here, but that ball now becomes the direct object, and what happened to the ball? It was thrown to the dog. So who is receiving it? The dog. And that's what gets the answer. For whom or to whom is receiving that object? Oh, it's the indirect object. So that dog is our indirect object. All right, just think of it that way. And lastly, I put down here ergativity just for review, right? Ergativity is when the subject of an intransitive verb can be the object of a transitive verb, right? Again, that goes with the cases, right? Your ergative cases and the switches around with the subjects and the objects of the cases. So you can have the absolutive case with an ergative case, right? Those pronouns. And I'm talking in terms of pronouns because remember, subjects of intransitive verbs can also be the objects of a transitive verb, and they can be alternated by using or by alternating the absolutive with the ergative cases on pronouns. All right, that's just a little review for those of you who forgot. But the indirect and direct objects are important. And I cannot stress that enough. Voice, indirect, and direct objects. Why? Because down here with these voices, you're going to see how the You're going to see how the relationships with those objects and whatever play with each other, right? I've already explained that on the agent voice, the patient voice, and the instrument voice, right? But when I come to the circumstantial voice, and I'm going to talk about like the indirectness of something or locations, i.e., where the verb or where the direct object is going or where the object is going, right, to whom or for whom. When I'm going to talk about that, you need to understand the concept of indirect objects. All right. Speaking of which, the agent voice, as I said in the previous video, can be noted as the actor focus or active focus, right? Or agent focus or agent trigger, active trigger, right? Focus or trigger, right? It just goes by those names. And I put those other common names that they go by because I feel like it can be confusing, right? Patient, again, patient can be your passive voice, sometimes like your direct passive or your goal focus or goal trigger, whatever, right? It's all the same. Instrument, just instrumental, which makes sense because we're talking about objects, right? Inanimate objects that become the subject of our sentence. We want them to be our main focus, and how they intertwine about and play about in the sentence and their relationships with the people that use them, the ergative and the absolutive case. And finally, for the circumstantial, we have our indirect. It can be also your indirect passive or indirect or beneficiary or location. Now, it makes sense why I can see they sometimes call it the location, because it does show direction for whom or for to whom or for whom the action of the verb is going. So aka it's going to a location, it's going to a person, right? It can also be beneficiary, and I can understand that because beneficiary, something is going to someone, right? The action is going to someone. They're going to benefit from that action. They're going to get something from that action, right? They will be receiving something from that action. So that's why it can benefit them. And already we talked about indirectness, right? So with the indirect object, again, it's answers to whom or for whom. So think of that in the circumstantial voice again. And this is just something I wanted to clarify with Austronesian alignment, because again, this is a really, really big topic, and it can get messy if you get yourself confused.